Assalamu alaikum and welcome back once again to Today in African History with Baba Shaka. I'm Baba Shaka and today is March 29th, 2021. Today in African History, we want to take a look at a woman whose life and loss, some would argue, helped trigger the American Civil Rights Movement. Many participants of and contributors to the Civil Rights Movement, for instance, Miss Dory Ladner, have stated publicly that it was the kidnapping and brutal lynching of young Emmett Till that propelled them into becoming active participants in the Civil Rights Movement. The way that the young boy was killed and mutilated, and the fateful decision of his mother to let the world witness the results of this brutal and inhuman act, set in motion events that will shake American society for years to come. Her decision still reverberates today. In 1955, Mamie Till was unwillingly thrust into American history. The murder of her son Emmett catapulted the quiet Chicago civil service employee into a lifetime of advocacy, starting with seeking justice for the death of her son. She was born Mamie Carthon on November 23rd, 1921, in a small town near Webb, Mississippi, the only child of John and Alma Carthon. Ironically, she was born just 2 miles from the town of Sumner, where the trial of her son's killers would one day be held. Her father wanted to leave the South and the cotton fields and made plans soon after his daughter was born. He found work in the small industrial town of Argo, Illinois, near Chicago, at the Argo Corn Products Refining Company. Alma Carthon joined her husband in January of 1924 and brought their 2-year-old daughter Mamie with her. They settled in the predominantly black enclave of Argo where everyone knew each other. But Mamie's world was shattered at age 13 when her parents divorced. A bright girl and good student, Mamie buried herself in her schoolwork. Mamie's mother, a member of the Fundamentalist Church of God in Christ, was strict. She had high hopes for her only child. Quote, "In my day, the girls had one ambition, to get married. Very few kids finished high school," unquote, Mamie would recall. But her parents encouraged her to finish. Mamie was the first black student to make the honor roll and the fourth black student to graduate from the predominantly white Argo Community High School. As she said, quote, "My mother always had been a firm disciplinarian, and she kept me on a rigid code of conduct. I wasn't allowed to run around with the gang, and I had to give strict account for my whereabouts outside of school," unquote. Every year, Mamie would return to Mississippi to visit relatives. She would spend the steamy summers with an aunt and socialize with other kids at church picnics. When she turned 18, she met a fellow from Madrid, Missouri named Louis Till. He worked at the Argo Corn Company and was an amateur boxer and was popular with many women. But Louis Till had his eye on Mamie. When they met, he took her to an ice cream parlor for her first banana split. Her parents disapproved, thinking the charismatic Till was quote unquote too sophisticated for their daughter. At her mother's insistence, she broke off their courtship. But the persistent Till won Mamie's heart and they married on October 14, 1940. Both were 18 years old. 9 months later, their only child, Emmett Louis Till, nicknamed Bobo, was born at Cook County Hospital in Chicago. The boy was the apple of his mother and grandmother's eyes. Aside from a bout with polio at age 5, after which Emmett would speak with a mild stutter, he was a healthy and happy boy. But Emmett would never know his father, who was shipped out to Europe as an army private. Mamie and Louis Till separated in 1942. 3 years later, Mamie received a letter from the Department of Defense informing her, without full explanation, that Till was killed in Italy due to quote unquote willful misconduct, whatever that is. By the early 1950s, Mamie and Emmett had moved to Chicago's South Side. Both her parents had remarried and left Argo, her mother to Chicago and her father to Detroit. Mamie met and married Jean Pink Bradley, but they divorced 2 years later. In 1955, Mamie decided to take a long-awaited vacation to Nebraska to visit relatives. She wanted her son to go with her, but Emmett was set on joining his cousins and spending the end of the summer in Mississippi. When she put her son on the southbound train, it was the last time she would see him alive. When her boy was killed, Mamie turned to the strength of her family and faith. Quote, when I began to make the announcement that Emmett had been found and how he was found, the whole house began to scream and cry. And that's when I realized that this was a load that I was going to have to carry myself. I wouldn't get any help carrying this load, unquote. Horrified by the mutilation of her son's body, yet determined that it would not happen again, Mamie made a stunning decision. Emmett would have an open casket funeral. Quote, I think everybody need to know what happened to Emmett Till, unquote, she said. Some 50,000 people streamed in to view Emmett's corpse in Chicago, with many people leaving in tears or fainting at the sight and smell of the body. After two of her son's killers were acquitted of murder, the Till case became an international cause celebre, with news articles and editorials across the country and in Europe condemning the verdict and Mississippi. With the international firestorm, the black leaders and Mamie were hopeful that Milam and Bryant would at least be punished for kidnapping. But just weeks before the grand jury met, Mississippi Senator James O. Eastland, a staunch segregationist and plantation owner, dug up information on Lewis Till's past and leaked it to the press. The U.S. Army had executed Private Till in Italy in 1945 for allegedly raping two Italian women and killing a third. Can you say government lynching? The insinuation? Emmett's behavior ran in the family. On November 9, 1955, a Mississippi grand jury refused to indict Milam and Bryant on kidnapping charges. Both men were free. Mamie turned to the federal government for help, to no avail. She had not received her ex-husband's army records, and she asked how a senator, but not a widow, could receive this information. She also tried to meet with President Dwight D. Eisenhower, but he refused. And FBI Director James J. Edgar Hoover wrote in a memo, and I quote, there has been no allegations made that the victim, Emmett Till, has been subjected to the deprivation of any right or privilege which is secured and protected by the Constitution and laws of the United States. Unbelievable. Thousands of letters protesting the Mississippi verdict poured into the White House. Mamie took her fight to the people and gave speeches to overflowing crowds across the country. Africans were galvanized. Membership in the NAACP soared. Africans in America were angered by Emmett's killing and injustice and moved by the loss of an only child to a young mother. Those in the trenches of the civil rights movement realized they had to move their fight boldly to the front lines. On December 1955, Miss Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on a Montgomery City bus and was arrested for violating Alabama's bus segregation law. Soon after, a 26-year-old minister, Martin Luther King Jr., called for a citywide bus boycott. The civil rights movement was officially born. More than 30 years passed before Emmett Till's story would find renewed national interest, becoming the subject of scholarly research and publication. Filmmaker Stanley Nelson interviewed Mamie, other family members, journalists, and eyewitnesses who remembered what had happened in Mississippi so long ago. And by 2002, Mamie was working on her own memoirs. But in a sad turn of events, just 2 weeks before the national television premiere of The Murder of Emmett Till, Mamie Till Mobley died of heart failure in a Chicago hospital. She was 81 years old. Ironically, today, March 29, 2021, marks the beginning of the murder trial of Derek Chauvin, the Minneapolis police officer who brutally murdered George Floyd last summer. For it appears that lynching and the destruction of black bodies is still an American pastime. To all of our subscribers out there, we are extremely grateful for your continued support. To those of you who have not yet subscribed, we urge you to tap that subscribe button down below. Help us in our efforts in bringing you these daily lessons. Please like and leave us a comment down in the comment section below. But most importantly, please share, especially with the young amongst us. So, until tomorrow, inshallah, this is Baba Shaka with Today in African History. Masalam.